Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank all our witnesses for your time here today. Really important hearing pursuant to what is our broader competitiveness agenda. I really feel like the United States, it's been discussed here, is falling behind with respect to infrastructure financing, development, and so forth. I think part of the answer is indeed P3s, public-private partnerships. For the uninitiated, that is essentially allowing, say, local governments to contract longer term with private entities for the financing, for the design, building, operating, and ultimately maintaining of pieces of infrastructure. Indiana, my home state, has been a leader in this area, along with Texas and some other states. But the United States, more generally, we lag the world. And Mr. Poole, you spoke to this. Let me put some numbers to the extent to which we lag the world. Between 1985 and 2011, there were nearly 2,000 projects funded worldwide, but the U.S. accounted for only 377. Now, there are a variety of reasons for this, including certain states not having authorizing legislation for P3s, but that's changing increasingly, and there are now 33 states that have legislation for such projects. 39 have some form of P3 legislation. But one thing I hear again and again from industry and local government, and this relates to the federal government, is that P3s are difficult to get approved locally because of competition with tax-exempt municipal bonds. That's why I agree with testimony today, again offered by you, Mr. Poole. We need to raise the cap on private activity bonds for highways, and we're working on legislation to make that happen along with some of our colleagues. We need to allow a very limited amount of P3s, I think, in the public building space to utilize tax-exempt financing. And I also think we should remove restrictions to allow more of what is known as infrastructure recycling. And without getting into the details of that, I would just offer into the record an article from the Wall Street Journal that explains this concept. I ask for unanimous consent. Now, I understand, as does everyone here, that P3s aren't a panacea. They're not going to take care of all of our infrastructure financing needs, and ultimately those bonds need to be paid off, whether that is a prescriptive model driven from Washington, D.C., or instead left up to the states or some combination thereof. But with all of that laid out there, and with 2 minutes remaining, I want to ask Mr. Poole that I often hear from some of my colleagues that PABs, or public activity bonds, are suboptimal because they allow the creation of infrastructure that doesn't serve a public purpose. Now, it's my understanding that there have been some special programs in response to, say, natural disasters, where the emphasis was to get money out the door. But beyond those sorts of in extremis situations, are you aware of any instances where infrastructure has been created under PABs that don't serve a public purpose in recent years?
Not that I'm aware of. Certainly in the PABs that were authorized for surface transportation projects, those have to meet strict criteria, and they're all can only be authorized for a state to issue them on behalf of a P3 project if the U.S. DOT's Credit Council approves them as meeting the requirements of the statute that says that for serving the public interest, I think 90% of the users has to be benefiting members of the public, and they're all doing that as far as I can tell.
Thank you. Beyond that misunderstanding, which I sense it's also a misunderstanding, do you agree with concerns that I've heard from numerous local governments in Indiana and even some folks outside my own state, that one of the main inhibitors to the use of P3 models, delivering oftentimes below cost, ahead of projected schedule, and delivering great important services with private capital at a time of constrained resources, is one of the main concerns competition with munis, which don't allow private sector engagement?
Well, there has been some tension in a few states between government toll authorities and private sector, whereas the government toll authorities believe that this was true, particularly in Texas, they should have first pick of projects and not like the private sector come in and take them. That's the only kind of problem of that sort that I've noticed, at least, and that It's only been really in Texas that that's been a problem. In Florida and Virginia, it has not come up.
But this dynamic is a real one.
It is a real one.
Tax-exempt munis and then which don't
Thank you.
allow private sector engagements. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.